The rain was coming down in silver sheets the night her little girl ran into the restaurant straight toward the man everyone else was too afraid to look at. Her tiny hands trembled as she begged a stranger for help, whispering that her stepfather wanted to sell them, and that he had a gun. In that frozen moment, the entire room held its breath. No one moved except him. The man with storm-gray eyes who rose from his table like danger wrapped in quiet certainty. Before we begin, if you believe that no child should face fear alone, make sure to subscribe. It's free and helps us share more stories from Desire Tales. My hands trembled so violently, I could barely force the key into the ignition. The rain hammered the windshield in relentless sheets, each strike echoing the chaos inside my skull. Sophia's frightened whimpers rose from the passenger seat, small breathless sounds that sliced straight through my heart. Derek's voice still clung to my mind like poison, every syllable dripping with a cruelty I had never truly seen until tonight. Those people will pay good money for both of you. Fresh meat always sells well. His gun had been steady, his eyes even steadier, and something deep inside me had shattered when I realized he meant every word. 29 years on this earth and I had never felt so helpless. Not even when Michael died. Not when I'd first become a single mother. Nothing compared to this. "Mommy, I'm scared," Sophia whispered, clutching Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed cat she'd carried since the day she was born. Her green eyes, my eyes, were blown wide with terror, reflecting flashes of streetlights as I pushed the car into Manhattan's storm-soaked traffic. "We're going to be okay, baby." It was a lie. A soft, trembling lie. But it was all I had to give her. The wipers screeched across the glass, revealing brief, fractured glimpses of a city I no longer recognized. Buildings loomed like silent witnesses. People hurried past under umbrellas, unaware that the world I'd been fighting to hold together was splintering apart in real time. Derek had finally snapped. The gambling, the drugs, the debts, I knew they were bad, but I hadn't understood the depth of the darkness until it swallowed us whole tonight. I'd met him 3 years ago at a hospital fundraiser. He was a decorated police officer, charming and composed, offering the illusion of stability I desperately needed after losing Michael. That should have been the first warning. The way he moved into our lives with unsettling speed, the way he wrapped control in concern, the way he made every decision sound like it was for our own good. But I've been exhausted, grieving, drowning in motherhood and my demanding psychology practice. I didn't know where I was driving. I only knew I needed distance, space, a sliver of safety. And then, through the streaked blur of the storm, a warm glow emerged ahead. Bellinate, a restaurant I'd only seen from a distance, golden light spilling through its windows, luxury cars lined along its curb like silent guards. Something inside me whispered, "Go there. Now." And without another thought, I turned toward the light. The storm had eased to a steady drizzle by the time I pulled into the line of gleaming cars outside Bellinate. Sleek silhouettes of Mercedes, BMWs, even a Maserati with its chrome still beating rain. This was a world I'd only ever brushed past on my way to somewhere less intimidating. But tonight, desperation made the unfamiliar feel like sanctuary. Sophia's tiny body trembled when I unbuckled her. I lifted her into my arms, feeling the fierce, protective ache that always rose when she was frightened. The bruises on my forearm throbbed from where Derek had grabbed me, dark fingerprints blooming in ugly contrast against my pale skin. As I stepped under the awning, the doorman's eyes flicked over us with a kind of professional understanding that told me he'd seen fear before, and knew better than to question it. Inside, Bellinate felt like stepping into another universe. Warmth wrapped around us instantly. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above cream-colored walls, the soft hum of elegant conversations weaving through the scent of garlic, butter, and expensive wine. Everything glowed soft, golden, impossibly distant from the nightmare we'd just escaped. A maitre d' approached, all polished professionalism and subtle Italian charm. "Good evening, signora. How may we assist you two?" I never heard the rest, because Sophia suddenly wriggled out of my arms, her small shoes hitting the marble with a panicked thud before she darted across the dining room. "Sophia!" My voice cracked raw and strained. But she didn't stop. She ran straight toward a corner table where a man sat alone, his presence so commanding it bent the room's attention without effort. He looked up at her, his dark hair swept back from a face chiseled sharp as marble, strong jaw shadowed with evening stubble, storm-gray eyes that revealed nothing and everything at once, a charcoal suit molded to broad shoulders and an effortlessly poised frame. The kind of man who didn't blend into luxury. He defined it. Sophia's small hands gripped the edge of his table as she pleaded with the innocent desperation only a child can summon. "Please help my mommy," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her fear. "The bad man wants to sell us. He has a gun. And he's going to give us to scary people." The room fell away. The man's gaze flicked from her tear-streaked face to mine. For a heartbeat, something sharp and unfamiliar crossed his expression. Surprise, then a kind of focused intensity that made the air around us shift. When I reached her, breathless and shaking, I felt the weight of his gaze sweep over me. Damp hair clinging to my cheeks, wrinkled dress, a bruise I hadn't bothered to hide. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, his voice low and velvety, controlled with precision, like someone used to containing storms behind a quiet exterior. "Sophia," she sniffed. "That's my mommy, Joanne. The bad man has a gun and he wants to hurt us." A muscle twitched in his jaw. Almost invisible. Almost. But enough to tell me that inside this dangerous stranger, something had shifted, something that might save us or destroy us both. And then over his shoulder, I saw Derek's silhouette appear behind the rain-fogged glass doors. Derek's silhouette blurred behind the rain-slicked glass, but I would have known that stance anywhere. The rigid frame, the predatory stillness, the relentless way he filled a doorway like he owned the air inside it. My stomach dropped. My pulse surged painfully in my ears. Sophia whimpered and pressed herself into my side. And for a moment I felt the world contract into nothing but terror and the rhythmic pounding of my heart. The man at the corner table rose in a single fluid motion, his height unfolding like a shadow stretching toward danger. 6'3" at least. Broad shoulders tailored perfectly beneath a charcoal jacket. There was nothing rushed in the way he moved. Nothing startled. Just deliberate, lethal calm, as if he'd been waiting his entire life for this exact moment. His hand slid into his pocket, slow enough not to alarm the diners but purposeful enough to make the air tighten around us. He pulled out a phone, its black surface gleaming under the chandelier's warm glow. Without looking away from Derek, he pressed it to his ear and spoke in a tone so quiet it sent a tremor through my spine. "Vincent, we have a situation at Bellinate. 2 guests require immediate assistance. Handle the armed individual in the parking area. Carefully. He's a police officer, but I doubt he's a clean one." The word struck me like a shockwave. How did he know Derek was armed? How did he know he was police? How did he know anything? Outside, movement flickered through the rain. Black SUVs pulled in like phantoms, blocking Derek's beat-up sedan with calculated precision. Men in dark suits, solid, disciplined, utterly silent, stepped out as if materializing from the night itself. Who are you?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. My question felt naive the moment it left my lips. His storm-gray eyes shifted to me, and for the first time I saw something burn beneath their controlled surface. Fury, yes, but also protectiveness sharpened to a blade's edge. He looked at me the way someone evaluates the damage before deciding how to avenge it. "Someone who doesn't tolerate men who threaten children," he said simply. or women who clearly need protection. Through the rain-fogged window, Derek's confident posture twisted into something small and panicked as the suited men surrounded his car. One leaned down to speak to him, silver hair catching the light. A man whose presence radiated authority even from here. Sophia clutched my dress, her breath warm and trembling against my ribs. "Will the bad man go away forever?" she asked, her voice tiny, exhausted, hopeful in the way only a child clings to hope when she has nothing else left. The stranger knelt, meeting her eyes with a gentleness so startling it stole the air from my lungs. "He won't hurt you again, Sophia," he said, his voice steady, certain, absolute. "I promise you that." And as I watched Derek's fear swallowed by a wall of black SUVs, I felt for the first time in months something dangerously close to safety settling deep inside my chest. The black Mercedes glided through Manhattan like a silent predator, its engine purring with the kind of restrained power that vibrated through the leather seats. Sophia had fallen asleep against my shoulder within minutes, her small fingers still curled around Mr. Whiskers, exhaustion finally winning over terror. I kept my eyes on her face as though sheer will could keep her safe, but every so often my gaze drifted to the rearview mirror, where his storm-gray eyes watched us with unreadable intent. "She's been through enough for one night," he said quietly. His voice carried that same impossible contradiction I'd noticed at the restaurant. Danger wrapped in calm, violence tempered by gentleness. "My home is secure. You'll both be safe there." I swallowed the knot rising in my throat. "I don't even know your name," I whispered. It sounded foolish, considering the man had just dismantled Derek's threat with a single phone call. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not a smile, but the hint of one. The kind that didn't soften him, but sharpened something icy and magnetic beneath the surface. Raphael Montesani. The name hit me like a jolt. I'd heard it before. In whispers, in news stories tucked between scandals and political shakeups. In conversations people thought I wasn't listening to. A name that carried weight. Power. Fear. Influence. A name that could open doors, or close them forever. A name people crossed the street to avoid. I couldn't finish the sentence. "Raphael didn't make me a businessman," he said smoothly. "Among other things." It was an answer designed to soothe, but instead it made my pulse spike, because the understatement was so intentional it bordered on theatrical. Raphael Montesani was rumored to control half the underground economy in Manhattan. And now I was in his car, with my daughter, and he was offering us protection. "Why are you helping us?" The question escaped me before I could stop it. He met my gaze in the mirror. Something flickering there, something dark and strangely vulnerable. "Because children shouldn't be afraid in their own homes," he said finally. "Neither should their mothers." Iron gates rose out of the darkness as the car slowed, opening with silent, obedient ease. The Montesani estate emerged like a vision from the pages of a Gothic novel. Towering windows lit from within, marble steps glistening under lantern light, gardens manicured into perfection by invisible hands. A fountain whispered into the night air like it held secrets only Raphael could hear. "Welcome to my home," he said as the car rolled to a stop beneath an archway large enough to shelter a small crowd. The man who greeted us, Vincent, was tall, silver-haired, his presence both dignified and frighteningly efficient. "Everything is prepared as requested," he said. Raphael nodded, then came to my door, opening it with a courtesy that felt deeply out of place for a man who commanded black SUVs with military precision. When he reached for Sophia, instinct surged through me. I stepped back automatically, shielding her. "I can carry her," I said. Raphael's tone didn't harden, it softened. "You're shaking," he said simply. "Let me help." Something in his voice disarmed the last of my resistance. I let him lift her from my arms. She molded to him instantly, her little face settling into the curve of his shoulder as though she had known him all her life, and as I followed him up the sweeping staircase into the glowing heart of his mansion, I realized I had crossed an invisible line, one I might never be able to step back over again. The guest suite Raphael led us into was larger than my entire apartment, an expanse of cream walls, soft lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the moonlit gardens below. The bed looked impossibly soft, dressed in layers of ivory linens that whispered when the breeze from the vents touched them. Raphael laid Sophia down with a tenderness that didn't match the sharp edges of his reputation, then stepped back, giving me room to tuck her in as though this were the most natural thing in the world. "There's a connecting room if you prefer privacy," he said quietly. "But many find it comforting to stay close the first night." His words hung in the air, heavier than they sounded. The first night suggested there would be more. I turned to him fully, my pulse thudding in my throat. "How long do you expect us to stay here?" Raphael's expression shifted. Still calm, still controlled, but with an undercurrent of lethal determination. "That depends on how long it takes to resolve your Derek problem permanently." The way he said permanently chilled me. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a simple, unvarnished fact. "What exactly does that mean?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. Raphael walked toward the window, the moonlight catching the lines of his face, illuminating the storms that seemed to live behind his eyes. "Derek Collins isn't just an abusive husband," he said. "He's a corrupt police officer with dangerous debts to even more dangerous men." My knees weakened. "What kind of debts?" I whispered. Raphael turned toward me, his voice low and grave. "The kind that get paid in blood if cash fails. Derek owes $200,000 to the Gulf Cartel. He was supposed to protect one of their shipments, cocaine moving across the city. But honest federal agents intercepted it. The cartel lost millions. They blamed him." The room tilted. I sank into the nearest chair as the truth crashed over me. Derek, the man I married after Michael's death. Derek, the man who tucked Sophia into bed and kissed her forehead. Derek who raged and apologized, who twisted guilt into promises of change. He wasn't spiraling because of stress or addiction. He was drowning in a world I never imagined he could be part of. Raphael's voice remained steady as he continued, though I could hear the disgust thread through it. "He's been working with them for years, moving product, providing police cover, eliminating evidence. When the last shipment went down, he panicked. He reached out to my competitors for protection, trying to negotiate his way out. When they refused, he looked for other currency." I felt the truth coming before he spoke it, a cold, sharp clarity slicing into my chest. "You and Sophia," Raphael said softly. "Collateral he offered them. 2 untraceable females. A mother and child who could disappear without attracting attention." The world went silent. No breath. No heartbeat. Just the crushing weight of betrayal sinking deep into my bones. "How do you know all this?" My voice cracked, thinned by fear and the beginnings of grief. Raphael stepped closer, his presence grounding even as everything inside me spun out of control. "Because the Gulf Cartel operates in my territory," he said. "Because Derek reached out to the wrong people. And because when my men investigated the threat to you, they uncovered everything he has done." For a long moment I stared at him, at the man who had stepped between my daughter and death without a second thought, who had gathered Sophia into his arms as though he'd done it 1,000 times. Fear should have flooded me. Instead, a strange, fragile sense of relief blossomed in its place. In a single night, Raphael had become the only man I could trust in a world that had suddenly turned unrecognizable. Morning sunlight spilled across the marble like warm honey, stretching long beams through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I woke to the unfamiliar sensation of safety, a feeling so rare it almost startled me. Sophia was already awake, her small silhouette framed against the glass as she pressed her palms to the cool surface. "Mommy, look at the pretty flowers," she whispered, her breath fogging the window. The grounds beyond were impossibly lush, manicured into sweeping patterns that looked like something out of a storybook rather than real life. I wrapped my arms around her, breathing in the scent of her hair, lavender shampoo and innocence, two things Derek had nearly stolen from us. Beautiful cages are still cages, a thought whispered sharply through my mind, but before I could explore it, a soft knock interrupted the quiet. "Come in," I called, expecting Vincent or a member of Raphael's staff. Instead, Raphael himself stepped through the door, carrying a polished silver tray laden with breakfast. He'd traded his formal suit for dark jeans and a charcoal cashmere sweater. Somehow, the casual version of him was even more disarming, the dangerous edges still there but softer, as though morning light gave him permission to be human. "I thought you might prefer to eat privately today," he said, setting the tray on the small table beside the window. "But tomorrow, I'd like you to join me for breakfast in the main dining room." Before I could reply, Sophia bounded over to the tray, gasped soft and genuine as she saw the heart-shaped pancakes, fresh strawberries, and an impossibly rich cup of hot chocolate topped with real whipped cream. "Did you make this?" she asked, her voice full of wonder. Raphael crouched to her level, his expression softening in a way that sent a surprising warmth spiraling through my chest. "My chef prepared it," he said, "but I told him what you might like. Was I right?" Sophia nodded vigorously, already reaching for a strawberry. As she ate, I watched them. This man the world called dangerous, leaning forward, listening intently as my daughter explained why heart-shaped pancakes tasted better than regular ones. Her trust was effortless, natural, pure, and Raphael accepted it as though he'd always known how to care for a child. The contrast between the rumors surrounding him and the gentleness I saw now was dizzying. "Thank you," I said quietly once Sophia turned her attention to the whipped cream. "You didn't have to go to such trouble." He straightened to his full, imposing height. "It wasn't trouble," he said, his stare steady, almost too deep to hold. "Sophia deserves to feel safe, cared for. As do you." I opened my mouth to protest, to remind him I didn't want control taken from me again. But Raphael cut through my rising tension with practiced precision. "I've already arranged leave from your clinic," he said. "Indefinite family emergency leave. Your position will be there when you choose to return." "You can't just rearrange," I began. "I can when it keeps you alive," he interrupted, voice calm but unyielding. "Derek knows where you work. He knows your routines. You are safest here." The cold truth settled in my chest. He was right. A part of me hated admitting it, but the part that loved Sophia more than anything knew the cost of stubborn independence. "What about her school?" I asked. "She can't miss too long." "Handled," he said. "St. Catherine's Academy agreed to enroll her immediately. Private, secure, discreet protection. The tuition is already paid." I stared at him, stunned. St. Catherine's had a 3-year waiting list. Before I could gather my thoughts, Sophia tugged on his sleeve. "What's that?" she asked, pointing to a chessboard by the window. Raphael shifted seamlessly, his voice warm again. "It's a game called chess," he told her. "Would you like me to teach you how to play?" And just like that, the morning unfolded with a quiet intimacy I couldn't have predicted. Raphael guiding her small hands across the board, telling stories about brave knights and clever queens while sunlight haloed them both. I watched in silence, realizing with a jolt that the man the world feared most was somehow becoming the person my daughter trusted instantly. And that was the moment I understood. Raphael Montesani was far more dangerous than I had imagined, not because he wielded power, but because he wielded tenderness just as fiercely. Sophia napped that afternoon, her breathing soft and even, a gentle rhythm that lulled the mansion into rare quiet. Raphael used the silence to show me more of his home, not the imposing marble corridors that looked like they belonged in a museum, but the spaces that revealed the man beneath the legend. The library, especially, felt like stepping into someone's guarded inner life. Mahogany shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes that smelled faintly of aged paper and cedar. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, catching motes of dust that drifted like drifting constellations in the golden air. "You read psychology texts," I said softly, recognizing titles I'd studied in school. Raphael stood beside me, his presence a gravity I felt even when he didn't speak. "Know thy enemy," he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting in a shadow of amusement that didn't quite mask the deeper truth. "Understanding human behavior is essential in my line of work." I hesitated before asking, "And what exactly is your line of work?" I wasn't sure if I wanted the answer, but pretending ignorance wouldn't save me or Sophia from the realities surrounding him. Raphael considered me for a long moment before speaking, as though calibrating truth, danger, and how much I could bear. "I manage certain business interests that operate outside traditional structures," he said. "Import and export, real estate, investment ventures requiring discretion, sanitized words, polished, but not lies." His willingness to give me even that much honesty surprised me. He shifted the conversation before it grew too heavy, leading me into a sitting room dressed in warm earth tones. "Your daughter is remarkable," he said. "Bright, resilient, trusting despite everything she's endured." My chest tightened with fierce pride. "She's the best thing I've ever done." Raphael nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "It shows." His expression changed then, subtle but enough to take the air from my lungs. "Whatever happens with Derek," he said, "whether you stay here or not, Sophia will always be protected. I give you my word." There was something dangerous in that promise. Something sacred. Something irrevocable. I should have felt fear. Instead, a strange warmth unfurled inside me. The warmth of realizing someone powerful had decided my child's safety mattered to him personally. "Why?" The word escaped before I could stop it. "Why do you care so much about strangers?" Raphael stepped closer, close enough that I felt the heat radiating from him, close enough that cedar and spice wrapped around me like a whisper. His hand lifted slowly, cautiously, and brushed a damp strand of hair from my cheek. I should have stepped away, should have put distance between my body and the man whose world ran on shadows, but I didn't move. "You're not strangers anymore," he said, voice barely above a whisper. His thumb grazed my cheekbone, the touch impossibly gentle. "The moment Sophia asked for my help, the moment I saw fear in your eyes, you became mine to protect." The word mine should have terrified me. Instead, it sent a shiver through me, a dangerous electric awareness that I didn't want to examine too closely before I could respond, before I could breathe. Vincent knocked sharply, his urgency slicing through the moment like a blade. "Mr. Montesani," he called, voice strained. "There's been an incident at Ms. Wright's residence. You need to see this immediately." Raphael's touch fell away, but the echo of it stayed on my skin, burning, haunting, promising something neither of us had the right to want. Raphael's study felt colder than the rest of the mansion, even with the soft lamplight pooling across the polished mahogany desk. He paced behind it with a fury so tightly controlled it vibrated through the room like static. When I stepped inside, my breath caught. The desk was covered in photographs. Not old ones. Not memories. Evidence. Fresh, brutal, undeniable. "He was there," Raphael said without preamble, his storm gray eyes locking onto mine with a force that made me step back despite myself. "Derek broke into your apartment last night." My gaze fell to the closest photo. The living room I decorated with careful, hopeful hands was in ruins. Furniture overturned. Picture frames shattered. Sophia's stuffed toys torn and scattered like casualties. My bedroom, my sanctuary, lay gutted, drawers yanked out, clothing shredded. But it was the message spray-painted across the living room wall that made my knees buckle. The letters screamed in violent red, jagged and dripping. "You can't hide forever. They're coming for you." My voice broke. "Oh God." "This wasn't rage," Raphael said, picking up another photo. "This was strategy. A calculated threat designed to flush you out." He placed the picture in front of me. Derek's patrol car sitting brazenly right outside the building. No attempt at concealment. No fear. Just confidence. Confidence that he still owned the ground I used to walk on. How did you get these so fast?" I whispered, though part of me already knew the answer. Raphael wasn't a man who waited for danger to find him. He hunted it first. "I've had surveillance on your apartment since the night you came to me," he said matter-of-factly. "I needed to know if Derek would return." His presence suddenly filled the room in a way that stole my breath. He came around the desk, crouching beside my chair, and though his expression was carved from steel, his voice softened. "Joanne, there's more you need to know about Derek. Things that will change everything." Something cold and poisonous slid through my veins. "What kind of things?" Raphael rose and returned to the desk, opening a thick manila folder with the kind of care one uses with explosives. "Derek Collins isn't merely a man with gambling problems," he said. "He's been working with the Gulf Cartel for over 3 years." "That's impossible." The denial came out thin, weak, already crumbling under the weight of everything I'd seen. Raphael laid out bank statements, deposits 10 times his salary, photos of Derek in uniform beside cartel transport trucks, screenshots of messages about merchandise and delivery schedules. Each piece was a hammer blow. "Why?" I whispered. Why would he risk everything? His career. His life. Raphael's voice held no mercy. Because he lost $200,000 on a shipment he was paid to protect. The cartel held him responsible. He needed a way out. I pressed a shaking hand to my mouth as the truth unfurled in my mind, dark and monstrous. "And the night you came to me," Raphael continued, "he'd run out of options. He'd already approached other organizations for protection. When they refused, he chose another form of payment." A chill crept down my spine. "Me," I whispered. "Me and Sophia." Raphael nodded once. 2 untraceable females a cartel could sell easily. A mother and child who wouldn't be missed for long. That was his pitch. Bile surged into my throat. Derek, the man who shared my bed, had been planning to sell my daughter. My daughter. Raphael's gaze softened. Not pity, but something deeper. Something like anger on my behalf. "There's something else," he said quietly. "About Sophia's father." My heart stopped. "Michael." I breathed. "What about Michael?" "He died in a car accident 4 years ago." Raphael hesitated. Just long enough for me to understand the ground beneath my feet was about to split open. Michael discovered Derek's criminal ties. He found evidence. He intended to go to the FBI. A silent scream built in my chest. "No." But Raphael continued, gentle as a man lowering a blade. Derek sabotaged your husband's car. Brake line. Clean. Efficient. He made it look like an accident. The world fractured. Air vanished. My body folded in on itself, grief and rage twisting into a soundless sob. Raphael knelt beside me again, his large hands steady on my shaking shoulders. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, and the sincerity in his voice shattered the last of my composure. "He killed Michael," I choked. "He killed him and then married me. He was planning this all along." Raphael's thumbs brushed tears from my cheeks with impossible tenderness. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low, steady, lethal. "Derek Collins will never touch you or Sophia again. I give you my word." And as he held me, my tears falling onto a man feared by the entire city, I felt something shift irrevocably. A line had been crossed. A line there was no returning from. 3 quiet weeks passed inside Raphael's mansion. Weeks where the world seemed to exhale after months of tension. Sophia blossomed at St. Catherine's, skipping into the car each morning with her backpack bouncing and her curls swaying. I allowed myself to breathe again, to believe naively that Derek had finally accepted defeat, that the threat had dissolved into nothing more than a shadow behind us. But peace is fragile, and sometimes it shatters with a single phone call. I was sitting in Raphael's library, a book open but unread in my lap, when my phone buzzed. St. Catherine's Academy flashed across the screen. A chill threaded through my spine before I even answered. "Miss Wright," Principal Morrison said, her voice clipped and urgent. "You need to come immediately. There's been an incident involving Sophia." My heart lurched. "Is she hurt?" "No," the principal said quickly. "Your daughter is physically unharmed. But there was an attempted abduction during recess. The perpetrators were intercepted by your security detail." The phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the marble as the world began to tilt. Through the window, I saw Raphael's black Mercedes tearing up the driveway, moving faster than I'd ever seen it. By the time he stepped out, I was already running. One look at his face nearly brought me to my knees. His storm gray eyes burned, not hot but cold. Cold in the way glaciers destroy mountains. Cold in the way a man becomes when someone touches what he considers his. "Where is she?" I whispered. "Safe," Raphael said, voice low, trembling with barely contained rage. "Vincent is bringing her home now. 2 men attempted to take her. They had a van. Sedatives. Zip ties. They were prepared." The clinical nature of his words made nausea claw at my throat. "Derek," I breathed. "It has to be him. His cartel friends." "Yes," Raphael said. "They came for her. In broad daylight. On school grounds." His jaw ticked once. "They will regret breathing." The front doors opened and Vincent stepped inside, carrying Sophia in his arms. She was crying small broken sobs that tore something open inside me but unhurt. When she saw Raphael, she reached for him instantly, arms outstretched and trembling. "Papa Rafa," she cried, burying her face against his neck the moment he took her. "The bad men tried to take me, but Uncle Vincent scared them away." Raphael closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, inhaling as though her small weight in his arms was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. His hand stroked her curls with infinite care. But over Sophia's head, he met my gaze, and what I saw there chilled me. This wasn't just anger. This was war. Pure, silent, calculated war. "What happened to the men who tried to take her?" I asked Vincent quietly. "Detained for questioning," he replied. The diplomatic phrasing told me everything I needed to know. Those men wouldn't leave this property upright. That night, after Sophia had been fed, comforted, and tucked into bed under a mountain of blankets, I found sleep impossible. The attempted kidnapping replayed in my mind like a broken film reel. The terror, the danger, the realization that Derek would never stop until something or someone made him stop. My feet carried me through dim hallways until I reached Raphael's study. The door was ajar. Inside, he stood in the half-dark, sleeves rolled up, one hand braced against the window frame, the other holding an untouched glass of whiskey. Shadows cut across his face, highlighting the lethal tension radiating from him. "You should be sleeping," he murmured without turning. "So should you," I said softly. He finally faced me, and the raw emotion in his eyes, fury, guilt, protectiveness sharpened to a knife's edge, stole my breath. "I failed her," he said, voice low and thick. "I promised she'd be safe. And I almost lost her today." "You didn't fail anyone," I said, stepping closer. "Your men saved her. She's alive because of you." But the words didn't soothe him. If anything, the muscle in his jaw tensed harder. "Derek tried to take my daughter," he whispered, the possessiveness in his tone sending a strange, aching warmth through me instead of fear. "My daughter." I reached out before I could stop myself, my hand brushing his arm. Heat radiated beneath his skin, a storm barely contained. His breath hitched. "You shouldn't be here," he warned softly. "Not when I'm like this. Maybe this is exactly when I should be." Before either of us could speak another word, something shifted, heavy, instinctive, inevitable. Raphael's hand slid to my waist, mine tangled in the fabric of his shirt, and the space between us dissolved like it had never existed. His mouth met mine with a hunger that stole the ground from under my feet. The kiss was fierce, urgent, the kind that comes from fear and longing colliding in equal measure. "Joanne," he breathed against my lips, voice rough. "You have no idea what you do to me." But before I could answer, the door burst open. Vincent's silhouette filled the frame, his expression tight with urgency. "Sir," he said, voice stiffening when he realized what he'd interrupted. "Forgive me, but this cannot wait." Raphael's hands tightened protectively on my hips before he stepped back. "What is it?" Derek Collins made contact with Gulf Cartel leadership. "They're demanding immediate delivery of the collateral he promised, or they'll take it by force. Our sources indicate they're planning a direct assault on this residence within 24 hours. Raphael went still. Too still. "What kind of assault?" "A full one," Vincent said grimly. "Armed. Determined. They know you have the woman and child." And in that moment I saw a transformation. Raphael wasn't a man anymore. He was a weapon forged in darkness, sharpened by loyalty and ignited by love. Raphael's jaw tightened as Vincent's words settled into the room like falling ash. The study felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing inward, the air charged with the quiet hum of danger. Raphael didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. But the stillness that radiated from him was colder than any fury I had ever seen. "Prepare the safe house," he said at last. "Joanne and Sophia will be moved within the hour." "No," I said, my voice cutting across the room before I even had time to second-guess myself. Raphael's head snapped toward me, storm-gray eyes igniting with surprise and something sharper. "I'm not running," I continued, stepping forward even as my knees trembled. "And I'm not letting you face this alone." He stared at me, longer than was comfortable, longer than was safe. "This isn't your fight." "It became my fight the moment Derek decided to sell my daughter," I said, breath shaking but steady. "You told me children shouldn't be afraid in their own homes. That mothers shouldn't live looking over their shoulders. I believe you." I swallowed. "So go. End this. But come back to us." The silence that followed stretched taut as a wire. Raphael stepped closer, his presence swallowing the space between us, his voice dropping to something low and devastating. Us, he repeated, tasting the word as though it meant more than he expected. Joanne, don't ask me for things you don't understand. I'm not a good man. You're the man who saved my daughter, I whispered. You're the man she calls Papa Rafa. You're the man who made her smile again. That's good enough for me. Raphael's breath hitched, the mask he always wore cracking at the edges. I saw something raw flicker in his eyes, something that looked dangerously close to fear. Not of the cartel. Not of Derek. Of what he felt for us. Derek has crossed every line, he said finally, his voice a lethal whisper. He threatened you. He tried to take Sophia. And now he's bringing war to my doorstep. He placed his forehead against mine, his hands cradling my face with a gentleness that contradicted the violence simmering beneath his skin. No one touches what's mine and lives. He pulled back, not far, just enough to search my face. If anything happens to me, don't, I breathed. Don't you dare go there. If anything happens, he repeated, firmer this time, Vincent will take you and Sophia to the safe house. You'll be protected. You'll be provided for. You'll never need to fear anything again. I shook my head, tears burning hot behind my eyes. I don't want safety without you. I want you. I want the man who carried my daughter out of the storm. I want the man who made her pancakes shaped like hearts. I want the man who held me when everything I believed in crumbled. My voice cracked. I want you to come back. For the first time since meeting him, Raphael looked unsteady, vulnerable, as though my words had struck deeper than any bullet ever could. He leaned in and kissed me. Slowly this time, not with urgency, but with something that felt like a promise carved into bone. I'll come back to you, he murmured against my lips. Both of you. Before dawn, I watched him descend the front steps, his silhouette carved in shadow against the dim sky. His movements were silent, deliberate, predatory. This wasn't the man who taught Sophia how to move a chess knight. This was the other Raphael. The one whispered about in the city's underbelly. The one Derek should have feared from the very beginning. As he climbed into the SUV and the gates closed behind him, an ache bloomed inside my chest, a fierce, consuming mix of dread and hope, because I knew this night would decide everything. And there was no version of this story where Raphael Montesani walked away unchanged. The hours after Raphael left stretched into a slow, suffocating torture. Vincent remained nearby, calm on the surface but checking his phone with increasing frequency, each glance betraying the tension simmering beneath. Sophia stayed close to me, her small hand slipping into mine as though she sensed the storm brewing far beyond the mansion's walls. Every sound, the shift of the old house settling, the distant hum of security patrols, made my heart lurched up. By the time midnight settled over the estate, sleep was impossible. I drifted through Raphael's library like a ghost, fingers trailing across the spines of books I couldn't bring myself to open. I told myself to be strong for Sophia, to trust Raphael's vow, but with every passing hour, dread dug deeper claws into my chest. It was nearly 1 a.m. when the front door finally opened. Raphael's footsteps echoed down the marble hall, heavy, slow, deliberate. When he appeared in the doorway of the library, I froze. His charcoal suit was torn at the shoulder, smeared with dirt and darker stains I refused to identify. His knuckles were split and bleeding, the raw skin pulling taut as he flexed his fingers. His hair was disheveled, his jaw tight, and in his eyes a coldness I had never seen before. "It's over," he said simply, voice rough and low. "Derek won't be a problem anymore. Not for you. Not for Sophia. Not for anyone." The words hit me like a blunt force to the chest. I rose slowly, searching his face for answers, Answers I wasn't sure I wanted. Raphael moved to the whiskey decanter, pouring a measure with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. The crystal chimed softly against the bottle, the sound slicing through the thick silence stretching between us. "What happened?" I whispered. I wasn't sure I could handle the truth, but I needed it. Raphael took a long drink before setting the glass down with a soft, controlled thud. Then he spoke, not like a man confessing, but like someone reliving the events in real time. "I found him exactly where the tracker said he'd be," Raphael said. "An old warehouse in Brooklyn. Meeting with 3 members of the Gulf Cartel. Middle management. Arrogant. Stupid." His eyes hardened. "They thought they could operate in my territory. They thought they could take what was mine." My pulse stuttered. "What did Derek say?" Raphael's jaw locked. "Everything." His voice darkened, heavy with disgust. "He bragged about planning to sell you both. Described you and Sophia as collateral. Told them he could deliver you within the week. He even detailed what they could expect from you." My stomach twisted violently. The room spun. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. Raphael continued, each word slicing deeper. "He told them Sophia was worth a fortune in their markets because she was young, untouched, easy to control." A wave of nausea crashed over me. I pressed a hand to my mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. "There's more," Raphael said. His voice dropped to something lethal. "He bragged about killing Michael. The world fell out from under me. He said it wasn't hard." Raphael continued, anger trembling at the edges of each syllable. "He cut the brake line. Watched your husband drive away. Then played the grieving friend at the funeral." My knees buckled. I collapsed into the nearest chair, shaking uncontrollably. "He planned everything," I whispered, horror clawing through me. "The marriage. The access to Sophia. All of it." Raphael nodded once. He said he was proud of how well he played the long game. Something in Raphael snapped then. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before devastation. He looked down at his hand as though only now noticing the blood, the shattered glass, the tremor in his fingers. "That's when talking ended," he said calmly. Too calmly. When he laughed about drugging you both for easier transport. When he described what he would do to ensure obedience. I handled the loose end. A strange, dizzying wave of relief washed over me, raw, overwhelming, shameful. I should have been horrified. I should have run. I should have screamed. But all I could feel was release. Derek was gone. The nightmare was over. "Thank you," I whispered, tears burning hot behind my eyes. Raphael froze. Shock flickered across his expression as though gratitude was the last thing he expected. "You're not afraid of me?" he asked. I rose slowly and crossed the room, my limbs trembling but certain. "I'm afraid of losing you," I said, voice breaking. "I'm afraid of what life would be without you in it." The shift in his face was immediate. Coldness melting into something vulnerable, fierce, devastatingly human. He reached for me with bloodied hands, cradling my face as though I were something fragile and sacred. "You saved us," I whispered. "You protected Sophia when no one else could. You gave me something worth fighting for," he said, voice thick. "Worth killing for." And when he kissed me, slow, reverent, claiming it wasn't darkness I tasted. It was salvation. Morning light filtered into the breakfast room in soft, golden stripes, as though the mansion itself was relieved to see dawn after a night steeped in shadows. Sophia sat perched on Raphael's lap, the two of them sharing toast as the muted sounds of the world drifted in through the tall windows. Watching them, my daughter carefully spreading jam while Raphael steadied her small hand, felt surreal, too peaceful, too gentle, as if the violence of the night before had been some distant storm instead of the earthquake that had just altered all our lives. Then the news anchor's voice floated through the room from the TV mounted on the wall, crisp, detached, oblivious to the devastation she was recounting. Body of NYPD Detective Derek Collins was discovered in a Brooklyn warehouse early this morning. Sources close to the investigation suggest Collins may have been involved in drug trafficking operations linked to the Gulf Cartel. My breath caught. The camera showed flashing lights outside the warehouse, the same one Raphael had walked into alone. A chill swept down my spine. The newscaster continued. Internal investigation records show Collins had been under scrutiny for suspicious financial activity. Authorities believe his death may be tied to gang disputes rather than his police work. I reached instinctively for the remote, but Raphael's hand, warm and steady, covered mine. "Let it finish," he murmured. Not coldly, not indifferently, just with the certainty of a man who had already made peace with the consequences of his choices. The anchor wrapped up the story quickly, already moving on to weather forecasts and the stock market as if his death, was just another headline. Raphael clicked off the TV with deliberate calm. Sophia, blissfully unaware, took another bite of toast, jam smudging her chin. To her, the bad man was simply gone. The monster under her bed finally defeated. The world safe again. "It's really over," I whispered. Relief didn't come gently. It crashed hard and overwhelming, emptying me out until all I could do was breathe and feel the weight lift, inch by inch. "It's over," Raphael confirmed. His eyes met mine over Sophia's small head. "You and Sophia are completely safe now." A month passed in a slow, healing rhythm I hadn't known my body craved. Raphael's presence became a constant, a steady hum of protection and warmth woven through our days. He would walk Sophia to the car each morning, crouching to tie her shoelace even though she knew how to do it herself. He came home earlier in the evenings, no longer carrying the heaviness I'd seen in those first weeks. The mansion, once intimidating, softened into a home filled with laughter and tentative beginnings. Sophia's nightmares faded. Her drawings changed from scribbles of dark shapes to pictures of her new school, her bedroom, and always Raphael. She called him Papa Rafa without hesitation now, her voice full of uncomplicated trust. I watched them together, games of chess, baking cookies that somehow resulted in flour explosions, bedtime stories read in Raphael's low, steady voice, and felt something slowly knit back together inside me. One morning she asked the question that made my breath hitch. "Mommy, can Papa Rafa come to my school play next week?" There was no hesitation in her voice. To her, Raphael wasn't temporary refuge. He was home. He smiled, brushing back her curls. "Of course I can, Principessa," he said. "I wouldn't miss it for anything." Later that day, after Vincent took Sophia to school, I found Raphael in his study, the same room where he'd once shown me evidence of the betrayal that had dismantled my life. Only now, sunlight warmed the space, softening its sharp lines. Raphael looked up from the documents on his desk, something gentle flickering through his gaze as I stepped in. "We need to talk," I said, settling into the chair across from him. His posture shifted, attentive, guarded. "About our future," I continued softly. "About what kind of future is possible." Raphael leaned back, studying me with that piercing focus that always made my pulse flutter. "I love you," I said, the words trembling out before I could overthink them. "More than I ever thought I could love again. And Sophia, she adores you. You've become the father she never had." "But," he murmured, because he already sensed the weight beneath my words. But I need to know what kind of world I'm bringing her into, I said. What kind of life you're offering us. I know what you do, Raphael. I know the danger. And I know it saved us. My voice cracked slightly. But can you step back from it? Can you build a life that doesn't end with you constantly at war? For a long, quiet moment, Raphael didn't speak. Then he stood and moved to the window, his reflection a dark silhouette against the sprawling gardens. 6 months ago, he said slowly, if anyone had asked me to leave my family's traditional businesses, I would have laughed. He exhaled, the sound soft but weighted. Then a little girl ran up to my table in a restaurant and begged me to save her mother. He turned to me, and for the first time I saw raw vulnerability break through his hardened exterior. You want to know what kind of man I'm willing to become? He said. I'm willing to become the man Sophia already believes I am. And in that moment, steady, fragile, breathtakingly real, I saw a future begin to take shape. For a moment, neither of us moved. Raphael stood beside the window, the morning light cutting across his broad shoulders, softening the sharp lines of a man the city feared. But the expression on his face, the quiet resolve, the tenderness buried beneath steel, made my breath catch. This wasn't the crime lord whispered about in back alleys. This was a man trying, with every piece of himself, to choose something different. He returned to the desk, not sitting behind it like a king surveying his empire, but instead lowering himself onto its edge so he was closer to me. You're asking if I can change the way I live, he said softly. Not who I am. A small, sad smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. I fell in love with who you are, I whispered. I'm asking if you can live in a way that keeps you here. Alive. Safe. Present. For Sophia. For me. Raphael studied me for a long moment, as if memorizing every line of my face before stepping onto a road he could never turn back from. It means gradually moving away from the parts of my empire that run in the shadows, he said, handing them off to trusted associates, focusing on the legitimate operations, real estate, restaurants, import-export. He paused. It means building a life where my name isn't whispered in fear, where Sophia never has to wonder what I do after dark. Will your associates accept that? I asked. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. In my world, they accept what I decide. And many have been hoping for something like this. The old ways are dying. It's time. The relief that washed through me was so fierce it startled me. But there was more, another truth I needed to speak. There has to be honesty, I said. Transparency. If we're going to build a life together, I need to know what's changing, how it's changing, and when. Raphael nodded. You'll have it. And Sophia, I continued, heart pounding. She needs a normal childhood, normal school, normal friends, no visible guards, no reminders of your old life following her into every corner. Raphael's expression softened into something reverent. She will have all of that. I'll keep her safe, but quietly, discreetly. She'll never feel the weight of my past. There was one last condition, one that lodged like a stone in my throat. No more violence, I said. Not like Derek. I know what you did saved us, and I'll never regret that. But going forward, we handle problems in legal ways. I need to know the man I love won't disappear into darkness every time someone threatens us. Raphael was quiet for several long seconds. His jaw flexed, a muscle ticking with the effort of honesty. That's the hardest one, he admitted. Not because I want violence, but because in my world, it's often the fastest solution. He exhaled long and unsteady. But for you and for her, I'll learn other ways. Emotion surged up my throat, sudden and overwhelming. Before I could speak, Raphael knelt in front of me, this dangerous, powerful man lowering himself with a grace that made my breath tremble. He took my hands gently, as though they were something priceless. "Joanne," he said, voice rough, unsteady, heartbreakingly vulnerable. "Marry me." The world stilled. "Not because you need protection," he continued, his thumbs brushing slow circles across my palms. "Not because Sophia needs a father, but because I love you both more than I ever thought myself capable of. Because for the first time in my life I want something real. Something safe. Something good. With you." My vision blurred. I felt the answer rise in my chest like a tide. Inevitable, fierce, undeniable. "Yes," I whispered. "But I need conditions." His mouth curved, reverent. "Name them." Transparency. A normal childhood for Sophia. A path toward legitimacy. No more blood unless there's no other choice. My voice cracked. "I need to build a life with you, not around the danger that follows you." Raphael lifted my hands to his lips, pressing a kiss into the center of each palm. "Then I'll give you that life," he said. "All of it. Every part." He rose, pulling me with him and into his arms. When he kissed me, it felt like the beginning of something vast and breathtaking. A future being written from the ashes of the one Derek tried to take from us. "I love you," Raphael murmured against my mouth. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving it." And for the first time since all of this began, I believed him completely. 6 months later, sunlight spilled through the stained glass windows of St. Bartholomew's Chapel, scattering soft colors across the stone aisle where I stood in a simple ivory gown. Everything about the ceremony was small, intimate. Nothing like the opulent spectacles associated with the Montesani name. This was exactly what we wanted. A wedding built not on show, not on power, but on healing, and on the quiet, steady love we had fought like hell to earn. Sophia stood beside me, clutching a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath. Her pink dress made her look like a tiny princess, but it was the pride glowing in her green eyes that nearly undid me. "You look beautiful, Mommy," she whispered, straightening my veil with the careful seriousness that came so naturally to her. "So do you, sweetheart," I murmured, brushing a curl from her cheek. The chapel doors opened. Raphael stood at the altar, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that emphasized the strength in his shoulders and the calm authority he carried even on a day like this. But what stole my breath was not his appearance. It was the expression on his face. Pure adoration. Awe. Something close to disbelief, as though he couldn't quite fathom that this moment was real. That as I walked toward him, our eyes locked and the world fell away. There was no cartel. No warehouse soaked in shadows. No Derek. No past carved with fear. Just Raphael, my protector, my partner, my future, waiting for me like a promise fulfilled. His hands enveloped mine, warm, steady, reverent. We spoke our vows softly, but with a conviction that resonated in the quiet chapel air. When Raphael promised to love and protect Sophia and me for the rest of his life, his voice broke. When I vowed to build a life with him grounded in truth, trust, and peace, Sophia squeezed both our hands, making the small congregation smile through their tears. When Father McKenna pronounced us husband and wife, Raphael cupped my face and kissed me with a tenderness that made the rest of the room disappear. Sophia threw her arms around us, and our first moment as a family was sealed in a three-way embrace that felt like destiny finally exhaling. The reception at the mansion glowed with soft lighting and white flowers. But the most meaningful moment came later, when Raphael guided me quietly to the study, the same room where our story had nearly broken me, then rebuilt me. Now it belonged to us. "Happy?" he murmured, sliding his arms around my waist as distant music drifted from the ballroom. "Completely," I whispered, leaning into him. Any regrets about the changes I've made? He asked. Over the past half year, he had transferred every illegal operation to trusted associates, keeping only the legitimate businesses. He attended school events, went grocery shopping with Sophia, even learned to cook simple meals. For Raphael Montesani, it was nothing short of a rebirth. My only regret, he said, pressing a kiss to my temple, is that it took me 35 years to find you both. My throat tightened. I reached for his hand, guiding it to rest lightly over my abdomen. Speaking of us, I said softly, there's something I haven't told you. Raphael stilled. His breath caught. His storm-gray eyes widened just slightly, a rare break in his control. Joanne, he said, voice barely audible. Are you? I nodded, tears springing to my eyes. Dr. Martinez confirmed it yesterday. Sophia's going to be a big sister in 7 months. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then something inside him broke open. Pure, unfiltered joy flooding his face as he swept me into his arms, spinning me in a circle like a man who had finally been handed the one thing he never believed he could have. A baby, he whispered into my hair. Our baby. He set me down gently, both hands returning immediately to my stomach with reverence. Does Sophia know? He asked, breath shaky with emotion. Not yet, I smiled. But I think she suspects. Kids always do. Later that night, the three of us curled up in the family wing Raphael had transformed into a warm haven. Soft lights, shelves of children's books, a fireplace crackling gently as snow dusted the world outside. Sophia drifted asleep in Raphael's arms, her head nestled against his chest as he traced calming circles along her back. She saved me, you know, Raphael whispered. That night in the restaurant, she saved my soul. You saved each other, I said. And you saved us. Outside, snow blanketed the gardens. Inside, wrapped in Raphael's arms with Sophia between us and new life growing beneath my heart, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. Whole. Home. Winter softened into spring around the mansion, the snow melting into clear mornings and gentle breezes that carried the scent of the garden's first blooms. Inside, our lives settled into a rhythm so peaceful, I sometimes had to close my eyes and remind myself it was real. No threats lurking in the dark. No knocks at the door that made my heart freeze. No Derek. No past waiting to swallow us. One evening, as the sky turned lavender beyond the tall windows, Raphael sat in the family room with Sophia curled against him. She drew small circles on his sleeve with her fingertip, a habit she'd developed when she felt safest. I watched them from across the room, one hand resting over my growing stomach, and realized how seamlessly we'd become a family. Not by blood, not by obligation, by choice, by love. Do you ever think about Derek anymore? Raphael asked quietly, his voice barely louder than the crackle of the fireplace. He wasn't asking from guilt or fear, just wanting to understand the ghosts that once haunted me. I considered it, letting the question settle. Sometimes, I admitted, but not with anger, and never with fear. He's just a shadow now, a reminder of how easily life can twist when you ignore the signs. Raphael's arm tightened protectively around Sophia. He can never hurt any of us again. I leaned my head against his shoulder, the warmth of him grounding me. I know, and I'm grateful for what you did. Even if we never speak about it directly. Raphael exhaled slowly, the tension slipping from him, replaced by something gentler. Acceptance. Peace. Sophia stirred in his arms, her lashes fluttering open, green eyes reflecting the firelight. Are we going to live happily ever after now? She asked in that innocent, straightforward way only children possess. Raphael and I exchanged a soft, knowing look, one born of everything we had endured, everything we had survived, and everything we now hope to build. Yes, Principessa, Raphael said, his voice tender but unshakably sure. We're going to live happily ever after. She smiled sleepily, nestling back into his chest, content in a way only truly safe children ever are. The sight of them, the man who once lived in shadows and the little girl who had begged him for help, made tears sting my eyes. In the months that followed, Raphael stepped fully into the life he'd promised. He transitioned the last of the illegal operations, letting go of the world that had shaped him for decades. His days filled instead with business meetings, school events, family dinners, and late afternoons in the garden where he would walk hand in hand with Sophia, listening to her stories about school as if each one were a secret treasure. Our baby grew steadily, each flutter inside me a reminder of how far we had come. Raphael attended every appointment, his hand always finding mine, his expression softening each time he heard the heartbeat that would one day call him father. He took early morning calls from contractors about the nursery renovation, white walls, soft lighting, a crib handcrafted by an Italian carpenter he trusted more than most men alive, and through it all, the mansion transformed. What was once a fortress built to intimidate became a home built for laughter and soft footsteps. Sunlit halls, a playroom scattered with toys, a kitchen that smelled of pancakes and warm bread, a garden that became Sophia's favorite place to spend afternoons. On one warm evening, as fireflies glowed among the hedges, Raphael wrapped an arm around my waist while Sophia danced barefoot in the grass, her laughter echoing through the twilight. "This," he whispered into my hair, "is everything I never thought I'd have." I looked up at him, the man who had walked through fire for us, the man who had rebuilt his world piece by piece to make room for ours. "This is the life we fought for," I said. "The life we chose." We watched Sophia spin in lazy circles, her giggles floating into the night. She stopped suddenly, running toward us with her arms outstretched. Raphael lifted her easily, settling her on his hip as she rested her head against his shoulder. "What are you thinking about, little one?" he asked. She smiled drowsily. "That we're safe," she said simply. "And I like it here. I like our family." Raphael's eyes softened, the fierce protector replaced by the man who had learned how to love without fear. "I like our family too, Principessa." The world around us quieted, the air heavy with the scent of summer roses and new beginnings. And in that soft, fragile moment, surrounded by warmth, by trust, by the family we built from the ashes of our past, I realized something with absolute certainty. We had found our forever. Not the fairy tale kind, not the perfect kind, but the kind forged through darkness, protected by strength and held together by a love fierce enough to survive anything. We were home, we were safe, we were loved, and the shadows of the past would never touch us again. My favorite part was when she finally realized that safety wasn't a place. It was the man who chose to fight for her and her daughter, proving she deserved a love stronger than fear. What was your favorite moment of justice in her story? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of courage, redemption, and love rising out of darkness. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.